Welcome back to our special report tonight, Unrest in America. I'm Jessica Cunnington. Our next guest tonight is Dr. Khalek Kirkland, the principal over at Boys Prep Bronx. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
For sure. And I know you're doing a bunch of things to connect with your students, of course, during this time, but you did host an amazing virtual town hall for your scholars last week so men of color can give their advice to students during this time. So tell us about that.
Well, let me begin by saying that I'm honored to be here. Boys Prep Bronx Elementary, we call ourselves the Boys Prep, is part of a bigger network of schools called the Public Prep Network. And right now we are serving predominantly low-income Black and brown communities. We cannot remain silent in this time of unconscionable acts of racial violence. We decided to take an approach that we spoke with our parents, our students, as well as our staff. So with our parents, we had a Facebook Live event where I was able to share my initial thoughts and let them know that as a father, I was very much concerned about them as parents and that I was empathetic to what it is that they were going through. Next, we had the Men of Color Town Hall, which was absolutely historic for our network, where we had a member of the police force join and address our scholars. In addition, we were able to take advantage of the men of color, which we had close to 19 men of color in our school. We began to give a history lesson that this was not the first tragedy that has unfortunately happened between men of color and the police force. We went through that history, and then we ended with our men of color giving advice to our scholars around what it means and what you should do when you come into contact with the police, how you should respect and keep your parents always involved as to what it is and where it is that you are at. And then finally, just words of wisdom and letting them know that we love, care for them, and want them to succeed and to eventually go into college.
And that's amazing because there's, 700 plus students that are under your watch, and also during a time like this to really address. It was great to see the difference and the variety in age of the men of color, giving those pieces of advice and giving those words of wisdom, but then also to the different ages, of course, of your students and of your scholars to be able to pick up different points that they were sharing, especially with some advice coming straight from NYPD members.
Yeah. So right now we serve over 600 scholars in grades pre-K all the way to grade 6. 2 years ago, we got our charter renewed that will enable us to grow into a school from pre-K all the way to grade 8 with a little less than 1,000 scholars. So it is very important that we take advantage of the men of color that we have in the school. It just so happened to be that my own brother is a detective on the police force. So he was able to speak to them very candidly about what is going on in the protest, what it is that you should and should not do, understanding your responsibilities as a Black male, as well as their rights, which is also very important. But I must say, as I'm assuming that your guests might hear, that it was very poignant to be able to hear from these men of color with regards to the advice that they had to be able to give to our scholars.
It was really powerful. That just ran the gamut from just, go for your dreams to have courage when you're out there and have that courage come for your heart. It was just a couple of things that came to my mind after watching it. It was beautiful. Men to men or men to boys. So that was just great to watch, and thank you, of course, for doing that for your students. But what is the role of schools during this time? Even remotely, obviously, during this COVID-19 pandemic situation, but then also approaching summertime, too, to have these conversations or gather at this time, even virtually.
Well, the good thing is that at Public Prep and Boys Prep specifically, the good news is that we have not had to be reactionary. We already have a team of social workers that have been working with our scholars to make sure that our core values of brotherhood, responsibility, merit, and scholarship is something that they believe in every day, both in school as well as outside of school. Our DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team has been very big with our staff, making sure that it's not just a one-time professional development, but it's something that's ongoing and that our staff hears about every day. One thing that's going to be very important that our superintendent has already begun to implement is to be able to make sure that we have the correct contact information, that we stay in contact with our families on a regular basis, to making sure, number one, are you okay? Serve as good listeners, being empathetic, and being able to provide them on the path of any and all resources that the families might need while school is not in session.
Amazing, amazing, and big team you have behind you over there to be able to connect with those families, like you said, on that regular basis. And real quick, before we go, just kind of your message to all young New Yorkers at this point.
The biggest thing is that, number one, you got to know that you're loved. You have to know that you matter. You have to know that you have people around you, just like myself, who are there as positive role models, that whenever you have a question, a comment, or concern, that there's somebody that you could be able to go to. That might include a police officer, it might include a member of your family or a member of your community. But go to people who you can trust to be able to get the wisdom and the knowledge that you need in order to be successful. But most importantly, we need you to be safe.
Dr. Kirkland, thank you so much for giving us your time tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Compassion is my passion.